Morning latte, you gotta love it. Hey everybody, Steve here from The Varied Life, retired in Korea. Yes, in case you didn't know, for those of you just watching, or maybe you didn't know before, the wife and I, we sold everything in the United States. Lock, stock, and barrel. The house, the cars, the guns, the ammo, the everything, including the kitchen junk drawer, which everybody has. And we threw stuff in a couple of suitcases and boom, we ended up here in Korea. And with that being said, we were able to retire early because things are less expensive here than they were in the United States. And but that doesn't mean there's not problems here in Korea. And so we're going to go over some things that are particular to Korea and what I'm seeing here as living as a retired expat in Korea. It's going to get interesting. And today we're going to talk about the doctor strike. There's new information that came out about that. Yeah, there's like 13,000 doctors on strike. We're going to talk about reverse migration. This is really important because it kind of shows that the American dream is way too expensive and people are leaving. and there's that. EV fears, there's a lot going on with that because more and more electric vehicles are seeming to just blow up and burst into flames, and that's causing problems and fears. And we're also going to talk about expensive airline travel for everyone, not just people who live in Korea, but coming to an airport near you under the guise of we got to save the planet. So, it's going to be an interesting little ride. So let's go ahead and start off, and we'll talk about this doctor strike. Excuse me. For those of you who don't know, the government here in Korea wanted to up the amount of doctors slots. So you have more medical school students, about 1,500, maybe 2,000, and that would result in about 1,500 to 2,000 more doctors, which has been sorely needed here in Korea because the Korean Medical Association has not increased the number of doctors in 27 years. Yeah, it is insane. And man, I hope I don't need to see a doctor. So with an ever-increasing aging population, the problem that we see in Korea is that people need more appointments. And the way that the Korean hospital medical system is organized, it's good because it deals with a huge amount of people in a short amount of time, kind of an assembly line type of process, which is way more efficient than in the United States. However, it comes at a cost, with 95% of the hospitals in Korea being for-profit, and the doctors don't want any more doctors. They don't want any help. And the fact that you have Korean doctors that are seeing 100 to 150 patients a day, spending on average 3 to 4 minutes per patient, working 36-hour shifts, just working out the wazoo, and it's incredible the amount of overtime that they do, and the burden of being overworked is just problematic. And so the Korean government said, hey, we're going to up the number of doctors because, one, we need it with our ever-aging population. In case you didn't notice, when you get older, you need more medical appointments. It's kind of funny how that works. But the KMA, the Korean Medical Association, the doctors union, says, no, we can't do that. And some of the reasons that they gave for not wanting more doctors is because they would have to share the prestige, as if prestige is some tangible thing and you've only got so much of it. And if you hire more doctors, then that means all doctors as a whole would have less prestige. That's an actual quote from the KMA spokesperson. They also said that it would create too much competition amongst doctors. Now, last time I checked, competition is a good thing because it helps people and it drives them to do better. Kind of like in a capitalistic free market society, competition breeds innovation, breeds better service, products, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that here in Korea, at least not with the Korean Medical Association. Everywhere else, competition is good. but not when it comes to medical. And so basically, these bunch of doctors walked out, about 13,000 of them, trainee resident doctors, at the behest of the doctors' union, saying that we will never hire any more doctors. And it's got to a point of where it's been a national emergency because it's affecting the people of Korea and also expats like me. I don't regret moving to Korea. So anyway, this whole thing has been going on for like 7 months, and the government said, hey, you need to go back to work. There's laws on the book that say that they have to because people were dying because all these doctors walked out, and the majority of work is done by resident doctors. They don't get paid as much, but they're overworked. I mean, they clearly are overworked. But then some of the way that Korean hospitals work gear it so that they see as many patients as possible. And I've talked about it before, prescriptions. Getting a refill on your prescription. In the United States, I used to complain about it, but I don't anymore because I have to deal with what I'm dealing now. In the United States, what I would end up having to deal with in regards to a prescription would be, I see a doctor, they evaluate, they diagnose, yes, you have this problem in your stomach, your brain, your pain, your whatever it is. And then the doctor would say, well, here's a prescription for 30 days, and I get that filled. And then usually on the bottle, you'll have 3 more call-in refills. So in other words, I get about, 4 months worth of medication, 3 or 4 months worth of medication in a shot, and I don't have to go back to the hospital for the majority of routine medications. Specialty ones, obviously, there might be some more, supervision. But yeah, I'm pretty much done. So, a couple times a year, 3 times a year, I got to go back, get some prescriptions, get refills because my refills had, run out. It's not a problem. Here in Korea, I have routine medications that are not specialized, they're not crazy. But to get a refill, I get 30-day refill, and then I have to go back every single month for my medication refills. Imagine if you have 5 medications. Now, it's not like they have GPs here in Korea to where, like, a PCM, primary care manager, a general practitioner doctor, where I would go in and say, my mental health meds. Imagine that. What are the odds? Me on mental health meds. I'm running out on those. I have pain medication. I have stomach medication. I have this medication, that medication. So I got like 5 medications. The GP would say, well, has anything changed? They do a quick little review. No, I'm doing good. I just, running out. I need refills. Okay. They do the script and boom, I'm good for, 3-4 months. Here in Korea, that doesn't happen. I have to get an appointment with every single specialized doctor for what I'm being treated. So for my head case issues, I got to see the shrink. I got to make an appointment and see the shrink, which costs money, just to do a refill, and have to do that every 30 days. When I see the gastro guy and I have my stomach issues and I got to get a refill for that, guess what? I need to go back, make another appointment every 30 days for, pain and for this and that and other medication. So in other words, I'm fairly healthy, in my opinion. I try not to take medications as much as possible. There's still things that I probably should take that I don't because of the way they make me feel or, whatever. But yeah, I've gotten it down to like 4 or 5. But every month I have to make 4 or 5 appointments just to get a monthly refill. So when the Korean Medical Association, the doctors union, says that, yeah, we're so overburdened and overworked, and it's like, well, you kind of asked for it. You put forth the rules in which how these hospitals operate, and one of these things is prescriptions and refills, and something that could be done through telemedicine. No, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to reduce the actual workflow because 95% of the Korean hospitals are for-profit entities, and they're all about making money. So the KMA somehow has powers over these hospitals. I'm not sure how. It's probably by keeping the expense of the for-profit hospital low by not hiring more doctors, and they make more money. It's purely a business thing. But yeah, it's amazing on how this is happening. So the government promised a bunch of this stuff that was going to happen. It ends up that the government is going to drop all punitive measures against these trainees, doctors that walked out. They were talking about fines. They were talking about a number of different measures that we're going to take if, hey, you need to come back to work. That's all there is. They decided to drop all of the punitive measures against the trainee doctors as it refocuses efforts on swiftly restoring operation of medical services disrupted by their absences nationwide for months. 7 months. And we're talking people not getting surgeries, people not getting chemotherapy, people not getting heart surgeries, people dying from strokes and heart attacks because there's no doctors. You know, the reduced amount of beds, they've shut off wings of hospitals and reduced the number of patients that the hospital can see because they don't have the doctors. Anyway, it shelved its plan to enforce these penalties, including suspensions of medical licenses. It was a tiered system of punishment to try to egg these people back to work. And yeah, this was a couple months old, but yeah, it ends up, it's really bad. The announcement comes after shifting its focus to filling the big labor void left by those trainees with new ones. Within 2 months, hospitals are expected to begin take steps to recruit new physicians for the new semester. There's a problem with that, and we'll see that. Ministry officials are hoping that sufficient number of new trainees will help normalize operation at 211 hospitals, which are teaching hospitals that have resident doctors and so on and so forth. But yeah, over 13,000 trainee doctors or resident doctors have walked out and haven't returned to work. Only several hundred of them have so far returned to work, and it's still causing a problem with the Korean people and expats like me. We have actually seen things that the wife and I wanted to get done or needed to get done, more importantly, and those, even in the big hospitals, we've called, and those appointments have been pushed back 6 months. So, yeah, it's very, very problematic at times. So anyway, they're trying to go through and this whole thing of urging these resident doctors to come back to work. And they're also going to cut the work hours to a maximum of 60 hours a week from 80 hours and introduce more programs to enhance the quality of their education. The maximum work hours, the funny thing is that the for-profit hospitals are being strangely quiet in this regard. Because the more hours they work, the more patients that they see, and reducing from 80 hours to 60 hours a week, they're going to be losing a lot of money. Money that has been coming in like clockwork every single day, every single hour, every single minute, with multiple appointments, the whole 9 yards. So just saying that you're going to reduce the number of hours from 80 to 60 isn't going to fix the problem with an overburdened system that is already overburdened to begin with. So yeah, it is deteriorated to the point of where, according to the doctor-patient ratio, Korea was considered a first world country. But after this strike, it has now gone down below the level of third world country status in regards to medical care because of the lack of doctors providing care to the population. I think it's like Turkey and some other country. There's like Korea, Turkey, and some other country, maybe one other below that. But yeah, it's now in third world country status, which is really, really crazy. So yeah, we've got a lot of that going on. There we go. That works. They basically walked out and said, yeah, we're not going to work because the doctors union says, hey, we shouldn't have to hire more doctors because it's too competitive and blah, blah, blah. And the hospitals don't want to pay more money for more doctors because that cuts into their bottom line. And who's paying the price? Yeah, it's the Korean people that are dying, and it's just ugly. So anyway, it ends up, despite their opposition, the government finalized an admissions quota hike of 1,500 students for medical schools next year in an effort to address the shortage of doctors. So the good thing is they got 1,500 more slots, But it's not as good as you think because, the Korean Medical Association say, oh, that's way too money. That will overburden the medical schools. And there's like 46 medical schools. So when you take 1,500 and you divide that by the 46 medical schools, you're talking about an additional 32 people. Yeah. And if you take 1,500 and you divide that by the 211 hospitals that these resident doctors will go to, you're talking about 7 additional people per hospital. And yet the Korean Medical Association says that will cripple the medical community. It'll destroy the quality of care. If we get new doctors, it'll lessen the quality of care that our patients get. And it's like, wait a second. I don't understand this. You're being overburdened with work, and the quality care is already degrading, but you're saying if we add more doctors that could see more patients and kind of alleviate a little bit of the burden, that's going to destroy the medical system. That's what KMA spokesmen have said, and I'm just like, that makes no sense whatsoever. And the KMA has not come up with anything that I have read online or on the news. My wife has attested this as well. They haven't come up with a plan to say, well, we're being overburdened, so we need to do X, Y, and Z. They don't do it. They just say the same rhetoric. Oh, it's too competitive. Oh, it's going to destroy the medical system. Oh, the sky is falling. They never offer one viable solution. If you're not getting paid enough, and some of these doctors haven't had a pay raise in a while, I totally agree with that. You should be paid what you're worth. Or actually, you should be paid what you're willing to work for. With that being said, outside of that, if you're complaining, you need to offer some workable solutions instead of just rhetoric and banter, and filibustering and just claiming that, oh, it's going to destroy our medical system by adding 7 extra doctors per teaching hospital. Explain that to me. It's not like they lowered the standards of medical schools. No, that's not what the government has done. They just want more people to go through medical schools. Again, 32 more medical students going to the 46 different medical schools in Korea. That's not a huge increase. And again, 7 additional doctors per hospital. How many departments are there in a hospital? That's not even 1 extra doctor for every department in the hospital. So how is that going to cripple the system? Yeah. Well, it's just too competitive. They just go back to that rhetoric. So the good thing is they upped the number of students to 1,500. I think it was 2,000. But the problem is that in the midst of this, the medical schools are involved, and 95% of medical school students are refusing to take license tests as quota feud continues. So yeah, once you thought you're gaining some ground, it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back. The Korean Medical Association has a huge pull on the medical schools, and it's united opposition by doctors. Students add complication to government plan to normalize hospitals. A survey released Thursday showed that 95% of medical students. Let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger for y'all. No, that's not what we want. What do we want? We want that. Maybe a little bit bigger. Yeah, okay. Released that 95.5% of medical students expected to graduate early next year said they will not consent for the state-run administrator of medical license exams to handle their personal information, according to the KMA. Korean Medical School Association, which is very closely tied to the KMA. So basically, the test administrators can't give the test or performance or anything because the students say, oh, no, you can't handle my personal information because the KMA said so. This causes other problems because if you don't know anything about medical schools, kind of in the United States and around the world, going to medical school is the same. You have to do a certain number of things. You have to get a certain amount of grades. You have to get a certain amount of experience. And then you go to a resident or training hospital to continue your training. And you have to get a license to go on to your resident training. Basically, the KMA has such overreach into the medical schools that they have somehow hoodwinked, in my opinion, all of these medical school students are saying, hey, just don't let them get your personal information, and that'll be a thing. These students have student loans. I'm not sure how they're paying them if they're not going to school and they're not working. How does that happen? I don't know. What's funny is that these students turned in their resignations saying we're not going back to school, and some of them the majority of them just didn't show up. The medical schools haven't dropped them from the rolls, so that shows you how ingrained the KMA is. So anyway, yeah, there's a huge void in trying to get these new doctors, and it is absolutely crazy. So even though the number got approved to increase the number of doctors in Korea the first time in 27 years by 1,500 doctors that would not only be in Seoul and big cities, but also in rural areas, that was one of the things that the government said is that we don't have enough doctors in rural areas, and the KMA didn't like that. They, Lord forbid, it's absolutely crazy. So we continue on with this, and then what we end up seeing is planned walkout by nurses this week to worsen the hospital crisis. So like I said, once you get to a point of where it's like, one step forward is two step back. And nearly 30,000 medical workers are set to strike from Thursday amid the labor shortage. 30,000 nurses and other medical workers are expected to exacerbate Korea's medical crisis across the nation, including struggling labor shortages due to the prolonged doctor strike. According to the Korean Health and Medical Association, over 91% of its members voted last week in favor of strike starting Thursday. They're calling for a pay increase and normalization of hospital operations, which is disrupted by a 7-month-long corrective lockout by trainee physicians. And many of the professors, they call professor doctors, they call them professors here in Korea, but senior doctors who oversee the residents or the trainee physicians, they have walked off and they have reduced the number of days that they work in hospitals. So it's not like they're saying, hey, we're going to strike. No, the higher level doctors have said, I support the strike, but I'm just not going to work as many hours. So the resident doctors, somehow they convince them to, go on strike and not get a paycheck or whatever it is. And then the senior doctors say, it's just being too much overwork. So when the more work falls on them and the responsibility, do they rise to the challenge and step into the gap to treat patients, kind of fulfill that Hippocratic oath thing? No, they say, no, we're just not going to work we're going to work less hours, which creates even longer delays in surgeries, treatments, appointments, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is a weird thing that's going on. But yeah, it ends up that there's about 29,705 unionized workers, which are primarily nurses, are going to take strike at 61 medical institutions nationwide, which is insane. The timing couldn't be any worse. It is terrible. Since the 13,000 resident doctors have stepped off, and now you're talking about 30,000 nurses that are basically saying, hey, we're not going to do this. Yeah, things are getting crazy. Now, there are some things that come with this, and people are like, wait a second. Like this, for example, medical workers are exhausted from skipping meals, enduring abuse, and having little time even for restroom breaks while trying to fulfill the junior doctors' roles as PAs, the union said in a statement. Physicians tasks should no longer be offloaded to nurses who have not been systematically trained for such responsibilities. They're trying to do the job. They're trying to get people fixed and helped and, put Band-Aids on their boo-boos and surgeries and chemo and all of this stuff. But now you're saying that, all these people are skipping meals and enduring abuse. But the Korean Medical Association is the one who sets the procedures and how these hospitals do the work. So basically, they've allowed this overburden even before the strike happened. But it's under the, Do you think there's some money involved in this? The bottom line, yeah, probably. The union added that many nurses have been forced to work as physician assistants after only a few days of training, leading to constant fear of making serious mistakes. And that is a very valid point. I mean, could you imagine? It's like you're doing you're a nurse, you're an RN, whatever specialty that you're in, and suddenly you're put in a position that you have way more responsibility and liability with minimal training. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that either. But again, what are the for-profit hospitals saying? Nothing. We don't hear nothing from them. Nothing. But we hear a lot from the Korean Medical Association. The union has urged hospitals to find solutions to address labor shortages and to agree to a 6.4% wage increase for non-doctor medical workers. Yeah, if you haven't gotten a raise, then you deserve a raise. But to find new solutions, that's the one thing that the KMA has not done, is offered any workable solutions to the labor overburden that we're seeing even before the strike. So it's weird that suddenly now they're the champion for, the nurses and the medical community and the doctors and all the whoosies and the whatsies. They were overworking them before the strike, and yet you had these similar complaints, but you didn't do anything. Hypocrite much? Just saying. If you need a pay raise, you need a pay raise. But doesn't the pay raise come from the for-profit hospital? And the thing that I have problems with is, why are we not hearing from the hospitals that are for-profit? Why don't we hear what they're saying? It is almost like a media blackout. It's almost like, Lord forbid that we talk to the hospitals and see what's going on and what's their side of the story. Nobody asks any questions. It is insane on the amount of silence that we get on this. And even then, when you get KMA spokespeople coming on to Korean news shows or television shows or documentary, whatever, type things, 48 hours or 60 minutes type things, and you have these reporters that are asking these supposedly hard questions to the KMA spokespeople. And then, there's this little back and forth. But they never ask, what are your plans to reduce the overburden? None of them. Not one reporter has asked that question to these KMA Doctors Union spokespeople. And it's the silence is deafening. That even a high school or junior high newspaper reporter would ask such questions, but here, no, nobody can ask those questions. It's just going over the same rhetoric and so on and so forth. Says, however, most hospitals, let's get back to where we're at here. However, most hospitals are not in a financial position to hire additional doctors or pay their raises due to reduced capacity to treat patients. Even before this, there was a problem, because basically what you're ending up with is you're at the peak, and when you can only spend 3 minutes with a patient, when you see 100 to 150 patients a day, you are severely overworked. And this is before the strike. This was normal. 36-hour shifts, going back to work. I mean, it's just insane. The official amount of work they do, and then, of course, all doctors around the world know that there's always more work that is done that isn't accounted for, that you're pressured into doing. So, it's probably even more. It says the junior doctors walkout dealt a significant blow to their finances as hospital relied on low-cost labor of those physicians under the guise of training. They're not paid as much as regular doctors because they're not fully certified doctors within their specialty. Now, should they get a little bit of a pay raise if they haven't had one in a while? Absolutely. But to kind of throw out and say, they're just low-cost labor for physicians under the guise of training. No, it's not under the guise of training. It is actual training. It is actually mandated by law, not only in the United States, but multiple other countries around the world, including Korea. It is lower-cost labor, because you're still required to have supervision, because you haven't proven either through board certification and or your reviews, that you can carry out the duties of that specialty to standard over a continuous period of time. Just saying. There's some holes in the Swiss cheese, and there's a lot of Swiss cheese around here. It says the hard work and dedication and sacrifice by medical workers have sustained our medical system despite challenges such as a walkout by trainee doctors and the rise in number of COVID-19 patients, which is a thing that's happening here. We got more COVID. If workers proceeded with the strike plan, it would further disrupt operations in hospitals, which would cause damage to the public. I urge you to resolve the issue with employers through talks instead of group actions such as a strike. And that is from the health minister, Cho Kyo-hong, talking to the KMA and saying, hey, we're these people are doing the best that they can, but yeah, this strike isn't helping anybody, and this whole rhetoric thing is only hurting the Korean people, which it is. And now, when we're talking about this, the doctors step up to protest to let nurses practice medicine. So in other words, the Korean Medical Association said, hey, doctors, resident training doctors, medical school students, go on strike, don't go to school, don't go to work, and because we don't want to add 1,500 more doctors, and we're so overworked. But having more doctors would not fix the problem at all. Seriously, really? Unfair, they say there would be too much competition. Really? Come on. Yeah, this is interesting. PAs expected to play a bigger role in treating patients beyond simple clinical tasks. Protest by doctors is intensifying as nurses are allowed to practice medicine under a new law amid a prolonged walkout by trainee physicians. I don't know. There's a demand for medical care, and you got to fill it. Otherwise, people don't get treated, and problems get worse. People die, no surgery, so on and so forth. National Assembly passed a bill Wednesday to define the roles of PAs and allow to play greater roles in treating patients beyond simple clinical tasks under the supervision of a doctor. They would have greater autonomy in providing healthcare services, including some medical practices only doctors have so far been allowed to perform. Wonder if PAs can do like refills. That would be awesome. Maybe just the medical community here in Korea needs to update its procedures, but I get it. The for-profit hospitals want as many people to have as many appointments as possible. So people like me or Koreans that have to get 5 medications have to make 5 appointments, make 5 co-payments, then you got the Korean National Health Insurance, which probably has their finger in a bunch of pies in this whole thing. So yeah, it's a tangled web we weave. But yeah, this law would go into effect in force as early as June next year. So yeah, it's not like it's a quick fix. It's really not. The doctors left. The bill passed by lawmakers does not define the range of PA nurses' roles, which would be determined by enforcement ordinances proposed by the Ministry of Health and Welfare. The Korean Medical Association, a trade union of doctors, issued a statement criticizing the Assembly for approving the bill, expressing its deep resentment. As previously stated, nursing law would deepen the conflict among medical workers and destroy, here's that destroy word, the training system for trainee doctors. It would also put nurses at risk so they could face legal troubles over various possible incidents. We have PAs in the United States. There's PAs in a lot of countries around the world, and moving to that paradigm didn't destroy any of their medical thing, giving services. It also said such a law would eventually lead to medical chaos. Dun, dun, dun. Medical chaos. Can you believe it? Would be de facto act as doctors in many hospitals where unlicensed medical practices would be rampant. Yeah, you need to be trained to be able to be a PA, and there are certain things that need to come into consideration. You can't just wave a magic wand and be a PA and give those powers and authorities to nurses to suddenly be a physician's assistant. And here's the other thing. They said the public will suffer the consequences, the organization warned. This is the organization that convinced 13,000 doctors and the majority of medical school students into striking. And hundreds of people have died. There are some people that go outside of Korea to get medical care. They do medical tourism, but you got to have money for that. So everyday Korean people are kind of screwed. And the public will suffer the consequences. How much has the public suffered under the KMA with their strike and their walkouts by refusing to compromise on anything whatsoever? Who's caused more suffering for the public? Has it been the government or has it been the KMA? I don't know. You decide. The PA is a professional out of practice medicine under the supervision of licensed doctors. Difference across it varies against different states and countries and so on and so forth. They do examination and procedures in the United States, treatments, diagnose illnesses, prescribe medications, that would be a huge one, and interpret diagnostic tests with others. The Korean Health and Medical Workers Union, which has nurses and other non-physician as members, welcomed the passing of the bill, saying medicine practiced by nurses would finally be protected under law after decades of efforts for the legislation. But it's interesting to note that who was opposing all of this for PAs? It was the Korean Medical Association, the doctors' union. So, of course, they don't want that. And again, it goes back to if you have a nurse and then you have a PA, the PA is going to be paid more than a regular nurse. Of course, you have more responsibilities and duties, so that's expected. But the 95% of the hospitals in Korea are for profit, so they don't want to do that. Yeah. So the next challenge is for administrators to establish a reliable system to educate PA nurses who have recently been burdened with tasks and so on and so forth. Yeah, you have to have training to be a PA, no matter what country you're in. So anyway, yeah, it's kind of crazy on what we're saying with this, and we continue on, and it's not even over yet. South Korea to hike fees for surgeries, reduce reliance on junior doctors. The government to inject 400 billion won over 5 years to boost salaries of junior doctors, physicians who train them. In other words, it's kind of like they want to give some carrot. You have the carrot and the stick, and this is obviously the carrot that says, well, we're going to pay you more to ease the suffering of the Korean people as a whole because of the strike. I don't know. What are the odds of that happening? But again, the KMA doesn't like that either. So it goes on and talks about the government plans to inject 40 billion won, which is about 300 million a year over the next 5 years, to increase the paychecks for both junior doctors and physicians who train them. The KMA doesn't like that. While cutting down working hours for junior doctors, they will get training fees up to 12 million won per year if they specialize in essential fields, including internal medicine, surgery, emergency medicine, cardiovascular, and thoracic surgery. Junior doctors in tertiary hospitals will have a physician supervising them. The government plans to pay up to 80 million won for each physician, physicians supervising junior doctors. Now, let me just kind of bring this into play. 80 million won, and the exchange rate is about 13.25-ish. So it's about $60,000 on top of what they already make to supervise junior doctors, resident doctors. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to say, hey, come back to work. And again, I have absolutely no problem with people being paid what they're worth. But the KMA doesn't even want to do this. You complain about not being paid enough. You complained about being overworked. And then when the government says, hey, we're going to put in and inject this amount of money for the next 5 years and pay you an extra 60 grand if you're a supervising doctor, still the KMA doesn't like that. I don't know. It's just absolutely crazy on what we end up seeing here. Let's see what else. Although the pilot program, the government will cut junior doctors' continuous duty periods to 24 hours from the current 36 hours and limit weekly working hours to 72 hours. By 2031, officials plan to reduce work hours to 60. Again, this is with the current climate that we see in Korean hospitals and the vast amount of people that they see in appointments and refills and all of this stuff. It's like a busy train station. If you go to New York City train station at the height of rush hour, that's what it used to be like in Korean hospitals, in the big Korean hospitals. It was like you got that busy rush hour feel. It was like, holy crap, this is crazy. But you can't just arbitrarily reduce the hours when you have the same number of appointments coming in. How are you going to deal with that? But the Korean Medical Association before said they don't need to change anything because you change something that will destroy the medical system that we have, and that will hurt the Korean people. How is just redoing the refill instead of going every single month? Just do it like we do it in the United States or as other countries do it to alleviate the overburden of too many appointments and reduce the number of people being seen when it could be just done with just telemedicine or through PAs or, extended refills, 2, 3, 4 months at a time for normal medications. But they don't want to do that. Oh, yeah, because it's about money. In line with the change, general beds in tertiary hospitals were reduced up to 15%, and the proportion of intensive care units will be increased over 50%. Non-urgent patients and those with mild illnesses can visit local clinics and neighborhood hospitals. Yeah, that's a little rough right there. If you're going to reduce the number of beds by 15%, with even before the strike walkout, these places were full, and now you want to reduce them, and you want to increase the number of intensive care units by over 50%. This is what's going to happen, like what we see in military hospitals. Being a retired military veteran, I've been in hospitals a lot, unfortunately, and if you don't have enough doctors and you have too many patients, you get this overburden of work, and if people can't be seen, where do they go? To the emergency room. So that's why in military hospitals, you'll see people that will spend 2, 3, 4, 6, even 8 hours waiting in an emergency room to get normal treatment that they couldn't get from their primary care doctors. It's a huge problem in the military. But to say that you're going to increase the number of intensive care units to 50%, that tells me that with this degraded quality of care or degraded amount of care that you're going to get, you're banking that there's going to be more urgent care. And so you're going to prop that up by 50%. In other words, it's a knee-jerk reaction, and it's not actually addressing the elephants, not elephant, but elephants, plural, in the room. It's just absolutely crazy. There's more stuff that goes on. Understaffed, overwhelmed South Korean ERs in emergency mode. Authorities vow to keep 4,000 clinics open, hiking ER fees again. So again, this is kind of a knee-jerk reaction. No, we're not going to work, and no, we're already overburdened. But now this creates even more overburden, which creates even more people flooding to emergency rooms. And yeah, we're going to hike those fees because there's fees. And for-profit hospitals, 7 of the 14 ER doctors at Aju University Hospital in Suwon, which is a hospital we're planning to go to, have tendered their resignations, putting emergency unit under immense pressure as it grapples with personnel shortages and having it operating far under its normal capacity. Yeah. 7 emergency physicians at this hospital, Kongguk University Cheongju Hospital, submitted their resignation. Each doctor had worked 12 hours a day to cover the ER throughout the day and night, becoming overwhelmed until you reach a breaking point. But the KMA says we don't need any more doctors. And this was a problem even before the strike, but now it's exasperated even further. So now to deal with the personnel shortage, Professors at this EWA Women's University Medical Center, who double as senior physicians, are mulling whether to close the emergency room for 2 days a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays. So starting next week, according to reports. So you better not have any accidents or emergencies on Wednesdays and Thursdays. You just need to suck it up and go on Friday, which is very problematic. Severance Hospital recently announced that it could not accept patients with severe injuries or trauma, while Asan Medical Center, which is about 15 minutes away from here, said it could not perform surgeries for urgent orthopedic cases or hospitalized new patients due to the staffing crisis. It's getting worse. So staffing shortage has also caused operations at Seoul St. Mary's Hospital ER to start breaking down as new hematology patients now cannot be admitted. Seoul National University Hospital informed patients that its emergency center could not perform urgent eye surgery outside of normal urgent operating hours. Yeah, people's eyesight are in the mix. Since hospitals are understaffed, which they were before, overworked, understaffed, and now they're really understaffed, other departments cannot accept new patients. So ER doctors who are already coping with extreme exhaustion are taking care of them. So similar to like what I said in the military and what I experienced is that, you can't get treatment from your normal doctor, whatever. The overflow goes to the emergency rooms. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. And they say, oh, well, you can go to a medical clinic, a local clinic and whatever. There are those things here in Korea. It's not like we're in this third world country. But the level of care that you get at some of these clinics is a little to be desired. And again, there's still that overwork. There's still that overburden. So now you have even more people that are not being seen by major hospitals, and now that's pouring into the private sector or private clinics, and they're getting overworked. And of course, it's easy for them. Matter of fact, I go see a local clinic doctor here for some things, but he calls his own hours. And it's like, hey, I call my own hours, so I only work as much as I want, and that's it. So the KMA saying that you should just go to a local clinic and you'll be fine, that they'll cover everything for us, amidst a strike, is not essentially true. So, it's just very problematic in that aspect. Some of the other things, Chuseok is coming up, which is a Korean Thanksgiving for a number of days, September 14th through the 18th. Everybody and their grandmother, it's like New Year's and Thanksgiving and some other holiday rolled into one. And there are a lot of drinking. There's a lot of emergencies. So, don't do anything stupid during Chuseok. Critical emergencies, treatments. Doctors have warned the worsening medical staffing shortage in operating emergency rooms during Chuseok. Plan to designate specific regional and local medical centers in 25 areas to serve as emergency rooms to handle the most critically ill patients. Military and public hospitals will be operating in emergency mode. And again, we've talked about this. The doctor-patient ratio in Korea is kind of like the lowest amongst all the industrialized nations on the planet. They're kind of like last. And in the midst of this strike, with 13,000 some odd resident doctors on strike, and with nurses and senior doctors striking and reducing their hours, it's gotten even worse. We've gotten into third world country doctor-patient ratio, and it was kind of on the cusp of that before, but now it really is. And again, operating in emergency mode, I just find it very problematic. It talks about how the ministry will raise the price of emergency room visits from 150% to 250% as of the base cost. Currently, emergency room costs around 40,000 won, which is basically $30 at tertiary hospitals, according to the ministry. In the United States, you'd be like, what? That ain't much at all. That's nothing. That is dirt cheap. And again, it's, kind of one of the things that you have less expenses. But with doctor strikes and, unions being stupid and not wanting more doctors because of the overburden, it's just very problematic. Um, let's see. So yeah, even then, the government said they wanted an additional 20,000 medical school slots. Excuse me. That would result in 2,000 more doctors. But then the government compromise said, okay, we're only going to take 1,500. Korean Medical Association, zip zero nada. They will not compromise on anything. They just say their rhetoric, and that's how it goes. More of this stuff. Let's get on to the next thing. Korea sees an increasing trend in reverse migration. Now, this is kind of interesting because usually you will see a lot of people from other countries come to the United States or other countries going to better countries in other countries around the world. Does that make sense? And what they'll end up doing is to build a better life for themselves. They have better opportunities, and the American dream, or whatever the country that they're going to, is to attain that dream. Now we're seeing reverse migration. So if that doesn't tell you that things in the United States are getting bad, is now you're having people who could legally immigrate to the United States, and they're like, yeah, we're going back to Korea. Yeah. So, yeah, very, very interesting. And so this is kind of an interesting thing that we end up seeing here. Okay, stop. There we go. Korea is witnessing reverse migration from countries such as United States, Canada, and Britain that were once considered dream destinations, the epitome of seeking opportunities and betterment for you and your family and your children. According to the Overseas Korean Agency, a number of permanent residents, basically, these people are saying that the cost of living, safety and infrastructure, and healthcare are some of the factors that made some Koreans return to their homeland. How bad has it got to be in other countries like U.S., Canada, and Britain for it to come back to Korea and deal with the medical strike that we got going on here? Of course, medical is just one of those things. Safety is a big thing. But yeah, infrastructure, the whole 9 yards. Several YouTube videos of Koreans talking about the tough life of immigrant life and the reason that they chose to come back to Korea instead of living in these countries. Yeah, it just ends up, this person here ended up saying the reality of immigrant life in Canada was pretty rough. There are pros and cons to living in Korea too, but eventually we decided to move back. We also missed our family. These people are going to go back to Korea early next year when they retire. The transport infrastructure and accessibility of local services in Korea is so convenient compared to the U.S. Monthly rent, taxes, and eating at restaurants is so expensive here, which is absolutely true. When you talk about utilities, I talked and did comparisons of utilities that we paid in the United States versus here in Korea, and it's half. It's basically half. We are saving money by being retired here in Korea, and it's insane. But yeah, these people are going through these things, and they're finding out that basic bills, utilities, the increases in those utilities are huge, and they're going up each and every year. And so people are doing the math, and they're saying, okay, let's pull out the calculator and punching in the numbers. And they're finding out it's like, yeah, this isn't going to work for us. So they come back to Korea where expenses are less. And that's another reason why we see a lot of United States people that are seniors getting ready to retire, or people who couldn't retire in the United States are now suddenly saying, hey, if I leave the United States, I can retire in another country, kind of like what we did. Anyway, it talks about, these people ended up saying that Korea is a developed country. It offers better medical services compared to the U.S. or Britain. In fact, older adults who wish to move back to Korea after retirement receive basic pensions regardless of their financial circumstances is also a contributing factor. So for those people who don't know, it's kind of like Social Security, in case you're kind of wondering what that is. Social Security for us in the United States, you have to work so many quarters per year and get so many credits. And then if you reach a predetermined number, then you're able to get a Social Security pension. Here in Korea, it's kind of the same thing, but not. But yeah, it's not as much as what you would see in the United States either. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, total number of basic pension granted to people with dual nationality was 21 billion won, or about 15.4 billion last year, up ninefold compared to 2014. The number of older adults with multiple nationalities receiving basic pensions also increased fivefold from 2014 to last year with said increase. So yeah, it's kind of interesting on what we end up seeing here. But this is going to have some problems when we talk about the economy, and the economy in Korea isn't doing good. The United States is in a recession, inflation, the whole nine yards, and of course everybody else suffers along with that, the war in Ukraine and that whole deal there. Is just pretty bad. And to the point of where the majority of Korean workers are engaging or considering in working, getting second job or doing side gigs on top of their primary or secondary job. And so that is becoming a thing. In a survey conducted by Job Research newspaper involving 1,300 workers, 81.5% of respondents said that their household economy had worsened this year compared to the previous year. And of course, with that comes increased mortgage debt, consumer debt, household debt, and so on and so forth. The primary factor cited was inflation, affecting 79% of respondents, followed by wage reduction of 8.9%. Kind of like what we're seeing in the United States, an increase of interest rates at 6.6% and debt growth at 4.2%. So in the United States, we hear how this current administration says, oh, everything's great and our economy is so good. It's not. Okay, when you look at inflation and what you paid 4 years ago versus what we're paying now, it's insane. But we're kind of seeing the similar thing here. 26.8% of respondents currently engaged in side jobs, while 55% are considering taking on additional work to make ends meet. Those who have no intention of pursuing on accounted for 17.9% of the surveyed group. So yeah, the primary reason was the inability to sustain their livelihood on their main salaries alone, with 55% of respondents indicating this as their motivation. Others included saving a lump sum of money, paying off debts, making use of free time, and preparing for retirement. But notice the preparing for retirement is only 5.1%. And we've talked about this on the channel before, how in Korea, like the United States, what we're seeing is more and more Koreans are falling into the trap that we see Americans had fell into, and not being able to retire, continuing to work into their golden years, which makes it no longer golden, but just a drudgery of never-ending work till you die. We're seeing more and more of that. And unfortunately, there's been other articles that show that the majority of Koreans don't feel they have enough for retirement, kind of like what we see in the United States. So we're kind of seeing some parallels between the United States and Korea when it comes to these things and inflation and work and so on and so forth. So a lot of people, the average income earned in second jobs was about $466. So the people have a full-time job, and then basically they're taking on a part-time job around $500 a month, which is similar to what we see in the United States. But again, part-time jobs in the United States used to be for young people dipping their toe into the employment world, going to school, part-time jobs, so on and so forth. Now we have a lot of seniors and people who those things used to be part-time jobs, and now they're making those full-time jobs. And that just shows how desperate people are as to work in fast food. Not that there's anything wrong with working fast food. You can do that, but now that is becoming a mainstay for a lot of people because their Social Security doesn't meet all their needs, or they don't have enough retirement income, or they just don't have enough income, period, despite being, retired or not. So regarding the types of jobs they hope to pursue, social media work is the most preferred option. Imagine that. Everybody wants to be an influencer and get paid. This was followed by assisting in office work, managing, doing sales at stores, delivery jobs, serving in restaurants, and working in a coffee shop, which was the lowest at 9%. Because when you can make your own coffee, you don't need to hire anybody. And I make a damn good latte, I'll tell you that right now. Low-income couples want $1,500 to sustain ordinary life. Again, we're kind of seeing the same thing. We'll skip over that because it's just ad nauseum of, Kind of like Social Security. Social Security has a cost of living increase in the United States. It goes up, but it never meets the real cost of living increase. So in other words, you might get an increase of 1 or 2%, but the real cost of living and the increases that we see through inflation and so on and so forth is usually double or triple that, sometimes more. So you get enough, you get an increase every year for Social Security and kind of like military pensions and so on and so forth, but it's never enough to actually meet the increase of the cost of living. And that's what we're seeing here in Korea as well for Koreans. And here's some other good news. I'm being severely sarcastic, is nearly 60% of major Korean companies have no immediate plans for hiring this year. Yeah, some 57% of major corporations have either not set up plans to recruit new employees in the second half this year and do not plan to hire at all. So yeah, we're getting this kickback. Where did I go? I'm missing. Okay, come on. Camera, overlay. What do we want? Camera, overlay, camera. Okay, boom. There we go. There I am. So anyway, it ends up that, yeah, they're not planning on hiring anybody. So we get this knee-jerk reaction because of the recession, because of inflation and a number of things. The doctor strike, because a lot of people aren't hiring. Now, there are some people that aren't hiring because, purse strings are tight and they're going through a recession. There's inflation here. Prices have gone up, 20 to 40% on certain items, kind of like what we see in the United States. Well, in the United States, it's worse, obviously. But yeah, so these companies are kind of reeling back, and I fully expect to see some layoffs. If this is the knee-jerk reaction now, it is a delayed reaction, and this is going to result in layoffs. And so you're going to have even more people looking for side gigs to make ends meet. And that's going to exacerbate the problems of people can't pay their bills or their debts, their credit cards, or their mortgages. And I think we're going to be headed toward maybe even a mortgage crisis, definitely a debt bubble here in Korea eventually. And kind of like what we saw in the United States, we'll see the same thing, hopefully not, but similar to the housing crisis that we had in the United States. But it's just a matter of time. If you beat the horse to death, eventually the horse is going to rot and it's going to smell, and you're going to feel the effects of that. And that's what we're going to end up seeing here in Korea with housing, because a lot of people here in Korea are property rich, but they're money poor. So in other words, they have a high debt to income ratio. In other words, they get a lot of debt, and they might have properties, and might be mortgaged to the hilt with the new cars, the new house, apartment, whatever it is, putting stuff on credit cards. But you got to pay the piper when it's due. And unfortunately, it's going to result in a lot of bankruptcies. There was a little bit of a correction, but strangely enough, we have seen prices increase in some areas for real estate, but that's kind of like the pie in the sky. That's for the rich people. For everyday people, we're not seeing that. Companies in recent years have been opting to flexibility adjust the period and size of their recruitment instead of hiring a fixed number of people in a set period. This is kind of interesting because now when the screws are being put on, instead of just the old-fashioned, we're going to hire 100 people and that's who we're going to hire, now they're looking at processes and how they do things, and that those ways are not going to require as many people. And then there's also going to be the automation that comes into play. Here in Korea, it should be noted that, let me get back to this screen here. I'm doubled. I'm not sure why I'm doubled. We'll just kind of throw that off there. We see a lot of automation here in Korea, and especially in stores and fast food. Fast food in the United States, usually you walk up to the counter, you see the person behind the counter, yeah, welcome to McDonald's, can I help you, or Burger King, or whatever. You can have it your way. And we're used to that. That's the normal way. You will have waitresses or waiters come and bring your food and so on and so forth. Here in Korea, it's a little bit different, because the majority of fast food restaurants, while they'll still have a cashier, the majority of point of sale is done at a kiosk. So in other words, you walk up to a screen and you're like, okay, I want a Big Mac bulgogi burger, I want a teriyaki this and that, and I want this with the side of whatever, and you pay with a card and boom, it's done. So the majority of transactions are done through kiosks, so they don't have to hire as many people. Because of the problems that are going on, that's what you're going to see in the United States. In restaurants, a number of restaurants here in Korea, they'll have minimal waiters and waitresses because they have robots that deliver the food to your table. So you will go and you will sit at your table, and there will be a little screen where you can order the food that you want. You don't even have to interact with a server to take your order, get your drinks. Everything is done on the screen in this little kiosk that's on your table that you're at. And then the people in the back, they cook the food, they put it on this robot. The robot wheels up and comes up to your thing and says, hey, here's your food, thank you very much, welcome, please, thank you. And you take your food, and that's how it's done. More and more automation is being done like that here in Korea, and it's normalized here. You're going to see more of that in the United States, and we already have, but it's more. It's going to be happening. So that's when these people that say that companies are looking at flexibility of how they do their operations and cost cutting amidst this time of tightening the purse strings. They're going to say, okay, well, we don't need 100 people because we can automate this, we can do this, we can use technology to do some of these things. We can outsource this to other third world countries to where we pay half of what we have to pay a Korean national. Same thing as we saw in the United States. When taxes and doing business in the United States is way too expensive, successful companies will look to ways in which they can remain profitable and outsource the work so they don't have to make big expenses. Think about the Korean doctor strike, and yeah, it all kind of ties together. So anyway, yeah, it's kind of interesting how it talks about that 23.8% of the companies said they're reducing spending to respond to potential uncertainties in management and reduce profits because of the economy and what's going on. Another 20% cited prolonged economic downturn, while 17.5% saying they have a difficulty procuring potential employees with necessary skills to carry out their duties. Okay, there it is. Let's not hire as many people because the economy's getting rough. So you might think, you know what? I'm tired of all this bad news. I'm just going to get in my EV and I'm going to travel. I'm going to take a trip, and that will reduce the expenses. Instead of having to pay, like, for example, here in Korea, I have a car, and on the economy, it would cost about $60 to maybe $70 to fill up the tank. So it might be like, you know what? I'm going to get an electric vehicle. And I'll save on that expense of gas because I will pay less in electricity, and so that'll be a bonus to me, right? Yay! There's problems with that because what we end up seeing here in Korea, and again, there's my thing. I'm not on the thing anymore. Add camera display. There we go. I'm back. Korea steps up efforts to counter escalating EV phobia. And here in Korea, we've had a number of incidents where EVs have spontaneously combusted in underground parking garages. They've also, this is the most recent one, was a Mercedes-Benz e-vehicle. Just kind of blew up on its own in an underground parking lot in Incheon and damaged, like 100 cars. It was a Mercedes-Benz EQE electric sedan and causing extensive damage to over 100 other vehicles in the facility. Yeah, this was huge. There's also been a number of other problems with Tesla vehicles that have caught on fire. And the problem is that when these things get on fire, there's not enough water to put these things out, which is very problematic. I mean, it is crazy. The people that have bought EVs, like this gentleman said, I feel a sense of unrest while driving my EV during the peak summer period as electric vehicle fires make headlines day after day. There was one article that my wife saw that said in China there's like 7 electric vehicle fires a day in China. We're seeing a lot here in Korea, and now it's causing problems because now insurance companies are like, whoa, your electric vehicle exploded, damaged 100 other vehicles, and did massive damage to the apartment complex, the underground parking garage. There's incidents of people that can't get out of their Teslas and they burn to death because they can't open the doors because the vehicle just locks them in, and then the vehicle explodes and goes on fire and they die. I would sense some unrest on that, but what we're finding out is with the heat wave that we're having is that electric cars and their batteries don't like excessive heat, and that's part of the reason of why these things are blowing up. I live in an old apartment complex, so there's not enough space to park. However, the repeated EV fires are fueling public concerns, and that these drivers should avoid parking in underground garages, adding to the stress I feel when parking at my vehicle. Another EV driver, expressed regret over his decision to purchase an EV. I got my EV inspected by the manufacturers and no problems were found, but I feel uncomfortable when parking in an underground parking facility due to the negative attitude of EVs. Some hospitals and commercial buildings have banned electric vehicles from their parking facilities, leading to difficulties for visitors who drive electric vehicles. Personally, for me, an electric vehicle it just doesn't make sense. You're going to give up on a gas-powered car over, where you have to drill. Yes, you have to drill for oil and petroleum and process that. But now we're going to trade that in. And instead of just drilling for one natural resource, now you're going to drill for 5 or 7 different types of mining operations to get the products and materials needed to make these batteries. Yeah, I just don't see how it's better for the environment. And oh, by the way, the majority of the electricity is provided by petrochemicals, coal and oil and all that. While it's cheap now, it's not going to be. As a matter of fact, in California, what we ended up seeing, there was an article that I ended up reading about, and there I am again. I guess I'll just leave it there. Reading an article of how the problem with electric vehicles. Remember, California ended up saying that, you're not going to be electric, gas-powered cars, and by, whatever date, 2030 or whatever, we're just going to have electric vehicles and blah, blah, blah. Well, their electric grid can't handle that, and now they're finding out they're losing tax revenue because so many people have electric vehicles that now they're going to charge everybody an amount of money, a fee per mile that you drive. Yeah, I told you this was going to blow up in your face. and it is. And then you look at the cost effectiveness. Yeah, you're paying less for your electric versus gas, and you're driving for reduced, but now people are finding out that, cities and townships and municipalities and governments, state governments are finding out that we're losing a lot of tax revenue, so the knee-jerk reaction is to, well, let's just impose a tax and a fee on every mile that you drive, which is going to piss a lot of people off because then it'll get to the point of, well, why did I buy an EV if I'm not going to realize the savings? Yeah, it's just not good. Some hospitals and commercial, but according to the data of market tracker Car Is You, EV sales in the first half of this year dropped 16.5% compared to the same period last year, where hybrid car sales surged 24.3% during the same period. According to data from K-Car, used car sales platform, number of EVs listed for sale surges 184% in the week following this EQE fire compared to the week before. So a lot of people are like, hey, I'm not going to deal with an exploding EV and batteries, and then, what are the insurance is going to go through the roof for EVs. We're already seeing more of that in the United States and here in Korea as well. You're going to pay more for insurance, and when something bad happens, a car fire with a gas engine is easier to put out than an electric vehicle with a battery pack. And you could have tons and tons and tons of water put onto an EV vehicle fire, and it won't go out. It'll be 6 to 8 hours until that thing is put out. So a fire truck will run out of water, and they have to call another fire truck to try to get it under control. And so, yeah, and supposedly, overcharging is not a thing, and well, apparently it is a thing, and because some buildings and parking structures are actually mandating, the government is now considering mandating that you cannot park in an underground facility or certain apartment complexes, they're mulling it over, if your car is at 90% or more. So, yeah, because of the liability concerns. Just kind of crazy. What we end up seeing here is, let's kind of go back up here. Get me back in the frame. What we end up seeing is the government also plans to implement a range of additional measures to combat these fires and the rollout of approximately 90,000 smart chargers to prevent battery overcharging, which is interesting because a lot of these EV car makers pride themselves on saying, you don't have to worry about that. But if we didn't have to worry about that, then why are these things happening? Notable measure to restrict EVs with a battery level above 90% from entering underground residential parking lots. Yeah, local governments are looking at doing that. Seoul and several other municipalities have announced they will implement this measure as early as September. So there's a reason for that number of people that are trying to dump their electric vehicles here in Korea because they're not going to be able to park. And, it's just not a good idea. If you have an electric scooter or one wheel or, an electric unicycle or whatever, bicycle, that's all right. I think those are kind of cool and those work. They have their place. But when you get to these cars, it's just very problematic. They argue that EVs are technically designed to avoid being fully charged with a safety margin of 3 to 5%. But yeah, it's turning out that we are seeing more and more of these fires, especially in overseas countries. And it's due to heat. So the things that they say, oh, well, this wasn't supposed to, in excessive heat, our batteries do fine, our cars are great, utmost safety for you and yours is proving not to be the case. And the thing that burns me, here's the thing that burns me, no pun intended, is that when you have Teslas, my wife and I were talking about this the other day, there was a number of reports, there's kind of culmination of reports of people who had Tesla vehicles were locked in their vehicles and couldn't get out, and there was a fire, and entire families died in the Tesla because they couldn't physically get out of the car as they were being burned alive. There's smoke and there's, oh shit, I need to get out of here. Hey kids, let's hurry up and, we need to get out because this is bad. And it's like they're doing the door and they can't, of course now everything's electric and there's no safety default of where you can automatically open the door in the event of a fire, and entire families are ended up dying, men, women, young children, babies. I don't know how a car dealership is able to still operate with the number of accidents that I've seen around the world where people are locked into the car and they're allowed to burn to death. I love Elon Musk. I love him for SpaceX and all the stuff that he does. It's the guy's a visionary. But, when it comes to this, very problematic. I'm just saying. When people can't get out of the car because the car gets on fire, give me a gas-powered car any day of the week where I can just pull the handle and get out. Case solved. Limiting battery charging, they talked about that. Thermal runaway is usually what happens in this instance when a damaged battery causes the temperature and the pressure in the cells to rise. And then once it goes, all the other batteries jump in, for the mix. But it ends up limiting the battery charge is not enough, and it remains unclear exactly what is causing EV fires. Professor at the Business Administration at Sejong University, the most effective measure is now to restrict all EVs from underground parking facilities. Some European cities have implemented similar measures in response to these fires. For example, in 2021, Germantown of Kulmbach had prohibited EVs and hybrid cars from being parked in underground facilities. So yeah, that's what we end up seeing, and it's like, all this crap that's going on in the world, I think what I'm going to end up doing is, take a drive in my electric vehicle. Oh wait, I can't because I can't park in underground garages, so I'm going to try to sell it. Huge increase, huge market for secondary EV vehicles. So you think, you know what? I'm just going to take a vacation from all this. Maybe I'll go to Philippines, maybe I'll go to Barbados or, Guam. I don't know. Guam's not really a big vacation place, is it? No. Maybe Hawaii or whatever it is. And you think, I'll just hop on a plane and take a vacation. Get rid of all this stress. But then what we end up seeing is this here with the sustainable fuel to be required for all international flights from 2027. Yeah, it's the climate change, people, and it's absolutely crazy. This actually sends that Korea Air starts SAF initiative, and other airlines will follow. The government will require all airlines in the country to use sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, as parts to significantly reduce carbon emissions, according to the ministry, and so on and so forth. Other countries have to do this as well by 2027. Basically, there have been videos here in Korea on YouTube where people who are pilots for Korean airlines and certain airlines here in Korea are saying, hey, if you're going to take an overseas trip and go somewhere, book it now, because by the end of this year, yeah, you're going to pay more because this SAF fuel is more expensive. Carbon emissions in our atmosphere is, carbon dioxide or whatever, ends up, 0.04%, and then humanity as a whole for the entire planet, however many billions of people we have now, only affects that like 1/3% of that 0.04% or whatever. It's some astronomically small. And yeah, it doesn't even make sense. But that doesn't stop people from saying, oh, we need to save the planet. To reduce the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation, mandatory for 103 member states, begins in 2027. To reduce carbon emissions by exceeding 85% of global average from 2019, will be required to purchase carbon offset permits to balance out excessive emissions. Yeah, they think that if... seriously? You're going to pay fees to combat global warming. Just plant more trees. It's a thing. Oh, but you can't make money planting trees like you can by doing this SAF thing. It's absolutely crazy. All national airlines will be required to at least 1% of sustainable aviation fuel in their jet fuels. Given the country's aviation industry emitted 20 million tons of carbon in 2023, it's expected to reduce it to 160,000 tons versus the 20 million. According to the industry, this reduction is equivalent to the annual emissions produced by 53 vehicles, each driving an average of 12,000 kilometers. Wasn't the EV supposed to be a good thing too? But then we found out that all the natural resources and drilling in mines, that ends up it's not really as good as what they thought it was. Yeah, it's a thing. So airfares. This is going to lead to higher airfares due to increased costs of the SAF. What are the odds? Somebody is making some money off of this. So yeah, it's very interesting that we're going to see another rise, not because of inflation, not because of anything other than, we got to save the planet. Now I'm all for being a responsible citizen of the global world that we have, and be nice to trees and all that stuff. But yeah, this is getting out of hand. And eventually, you're not going to be able to go anywhere in your EV, and you're going to be limited by the number of miles that you can drive because you drive an EV. You're not going to be able to park where you want, and they can shut your vehicle off whenever they want, except for the fire when it starts on fire. And then it's like, oh, well, I want to take a stress free vacation, but yeah, the added increase on flights and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think I'll just sit home and eat my ramen. Yeah. South Koreans air recent use of SAF. Korea has become the 20th country in the world to incorporate sustainable aviation fuel into commercial flights. There's going to be a lot more, and it's going to happen in the U.S. and other countries around the world. So, yeah. The European Union announced that member states will require to blend at least 2% starting in 2025, with blending increasing to 6% by 2030 and 70% by 2050. Singapore and India have plans to set and do their thing, additionally plans. So in other words, we see this plan, and we're going to see we're going to see this charted out as an increase in the cost of aviation fuel, and so your vacations are going to get fewer and farther between, and you're going to have more local vacations. In other words, where you're not going to fly, which is going to hurt the tourist industry, which is going to have a knee-jerk reaction to local economies here and afar, and all of that. Yeah, you see how it's going. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we got going on. Being retired here in Korea, the doctor strike, reverse migration. With that, we see migration of people from the United States and other countries that can't afford to retire, moving to countries to where they can, and it is more affordable, kind of like what we did. EV fares, I will never buy an EV vehicle as long as I live. And the more expensive airline travel for all is coming to a itinerary near you. So if you want to see some foreign countries, especially, it's better to do it now because you can do a reservation, I think, up to a year out. So plan to make some trips, make those reservations. Yeah, get the refund, if you want to refund your ticket and cancel that, get the full refund, definitely get that. But yeah, take advantage while you can because, yeah, after a while, you're going to have to pay those increased costs soon and very soon. And yeah, it's like it said, it's going to go up by 6% by 2030, 70% by 2050. And again, other companies, have different percentages of which they're going to add, which would be interesting to see what the United States is going to be, because then you will actually be able to chart yourself on the increases for air travel. And another added expense that you're going to experience, or maybe not experience, vacation or air travel because of the increased costs. So, yeah, that's a lot going on, isn't it? As long as they don't increase the cost of coffee beans, I'll be okay. Or tax the amount of reps that I do in the gym. So, yeah, that's what we got going on here in Korea. You will have jumps and hurdles no matter where you retire to, but it seems like overseas retirement, you have less expenses than you do in the United States. Definitely, I know that for sure. And people that couldn't retire in the United States can retire overseas, but there's still things that you're going to experience. Maybe not like in the United States. Maybe it's totally something different like the doctor strike. But yeah, I don't regret moving and retiring here to Korea. So that's kind of a thing. And yeah, it was either that or stay in the United States and keep working and not retire until I was like 70. Do the math. It was easy for us to decide. Yeah, there's a little bit of adjustment period, and yeah, there's problems in every country. You won't find a perfect country, and you'll still have to pay taxes. It doesn't matter if, it is what it is. But yeah, just do the best with what you can with what you have and look to stretch your dollar, and overseas retirement was a way for us to do that, and a lot of other people. And so much so, the prices are so expensive in the United States. Koreans are coming back from USA, Canada, and Britain, and coming back to Korea. And even amidst all the problems here, it's still cheaper here than it is in those countries. So for various reasons. If you have any comments, put it in the comment section down below. I'd love to read those. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. And if you want to buy me a coffee, you can see the link down there. It is also in the description box, buymeacoffee.com, /The Varied Life. And if you have questions on retiring here in Korea, my wife was a Korean citizen at the time, so we were able to retire here in Korea through an F4 and F1 visa system or visa. And if you're kind of in that situation where you and your spouse has some Korean ancestry, might be worth considering. Not saying it's for everybody, and everybody's going to make their own decisions. But if you can't retire in the United States and you're looking to retire, check out my channel. I also have some other videos on what we did and sharing our experiences of leaving the United States, lock, stock, and barrel, and retiring here in Korea. So there's some useful information. And the email's there for, I do resin printing, painting, all kinds of cool stuff. This is the most recent little print here that I have of the guy, kind of a Funko bobblehead. Tried doing that. And some fitness stuff. So I'd appreciate if you'd like and subscribe. Again, if you buy me a coffee, that would be awesome. I would appreciate that. And it will just go right back into the channel. So that's what we got going on. Put your experiences. Put them in the comments section. If you got questions, you can put them in the comments or you can email me. And I'm pretty good at replying back, even though I'm retired and busy. Yeah, I'd like to hear your experiences and where you're from. If it's the United States or some other country, whether it's medical, whether it's, retirement, EV, what do you see with EV vehicles in where you live? Are you planning on taking vacations? Did you even know about this aviation fuel initiative thing that's going on that's going to hike up prices and expenses? Let's talk, chat, see what happens. All right, that's going to be it. I'm starving. I'm getting hangry, so I got to leave. So we will see you on the next video. Peace. Good stuff.